Peter. Hey, Bob. So good to see you.
Good to be with you today.
It's always a joy, my friend.
So, as somebody who just loves to talk about this with me, I want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of leadership today. And specifically, how do we build leaders? Like, what are the qualities, or what should we be looking for both in ourselves, or how should we be acting? And then what should we expect from the other person who God may call us to lead? So with that big, broad question, I'm going to throw it to you, and we'll kind of have a discussion about it.
Right? You know, what an important subject that you talked about. It's about building people. Because, you know, you can manage the machines, you can manage the budget, you can manage anything.
Right.
But when it comes to people, this is who we are called as people, to build people. And that's the very essence of all this conversation and ministry, whatever you want to call it. It's ultimately building people. And I think Jesus shows that model to us when he comes. He kind of picks up the people, and then he invests his entire journey. That is his time. Now imagine, Jesus could have gone anywhere and preached. And he could have had a bigger crowd, bigger ministry, bigger things, anything. But he just zeroed in on people, and that was his ministry. So building people is the essence of all that we are doing. God is interested in people, for God so loved the world means people. I mean, if God so loved the people, God so loved the world, and he was willing to give his son for that purpose, you and I come on the scene, and we have an agenda that we have the budgets to manage, the issues to manage, and we're running it. What is the most important thing? Is to pause in our lives and say, you know, am I building people? You could be the most effective preacher, nothing wrong with that. You could be the most gifted person, nothing wrong with that. But are you taking time to build people?
So, of the things that I just heard, you said time. Like giving people time in a society like ours where time is at a premium. Well, not so much during COVID, but we know what's going to happen. It's the time recovery machine where all of a sudden people are going to go, oh, I lost a year, now I got to get going again. And so how does one take the time to really, or even offer one's time to another? What are there some characteristics that we need to have as leaders to build other leaders? Like, anything come to mind?
You know, Bob, it's very interesting that you should choose that word time, because I want to tell you what we say, our phrase is sometimes that time is money.
Right.
And unfortunately, it is kind of a true, but not all the truth. Because what we do is we equate people with time, and you don't do that. Because the rest of the world doesn't run on time, they run on people. The rest of the world focuses more on people. It's not about time. That's why, you know, in America we're so much trying to, you know, 10 o'clock meeting, 10:30 we're done. You know, somebody told me the American churches are like a dry cleaner. Come in 1 hour and we'll clean it and give it back to you. And I found it's so true.
Yeah.
That we're in by 11, we're out by 12. I mean, not a minute. I mean, I remember a church when I was pastoring, as I was preaching, and I know that NFL is going to start at 12. And the guy was looking at the watch. I know he was hinting me as a preacher, hey, cut it off. We all preach on time. We all live by time. We value time. We need to do that. But when it comes to people, you don't put the value of people more than time, time versus people. If people are we're going to build, we need to give this time. So one of the biggest obstacles is time. In our culture, we just don't have time. We just run for everything on schedule. Life is around time. It's not around people. The rest of the world is around people.
Isn't that so interesting? America's so caught up in the fact that it has to be, you know, you got to be up by noon because kickoff is, or, you know, time is money, or anything as it relates to it. But yet the real world, I would say the world of Christ would tell us that, no, I think that leads into that thing that you're talking about here. We've got to have patience, right? Is that what you're saying? Patience, time first. I've got to realize time is important to give to build another leader, but then also that time leads into this sense of patience. Like they're not, you can't put them in the oven and they're going to pop out little doughboys for you. Is
It's
that
a great segue, right? Time, when you give up on a kind of an idea of time bound, you begin to learn a new thing in your life about patience, and this is what we don't have. Because time runs us. If people run us, then you need to have patience, because when you spend time with people, they're irritating sometimes, they don't want to do what you want them to do. These are all part and parcel of leadership. Jesus, imagine having these fishermen, and these are fishermen, they're business people, they're kind of from a lower strata of the community because they're Galileans. All those things come, but he comes to them, he has so much of patience, and imagine that he could have impacted so many thousands of people. He did. At events, he does impact so many people, they're willing to follow him. But he kind of blocks off all that time, and he says, I need to invest in these 12 people. And then he has a lot of patience. These guys behind him, just few feet behind him, murmuring, trying to become who's going to be the next leader, who's going to do this and all that stuff. Yet he listens and has patience. And I think this leads us to understand, as a leader, you've got to have a lot of patience. So when you unhook yourself from time, I'm not saying completely, not that you don't have run with time. You have to have time, because the sun rises at a certain time and it sets at a certain time. I'm not saying that we should not be looking at time. But I think if you're bound by this, then you really don't have patience for people. And this calls us a patience. So what if you're 10, 20 minutes, 15 minutes late somewhere, but somebody's wanting to talk to you as a leader. And I know that you got a 2 o'clock appointment. We run our schedules, appointment. Right. All that is important. All that is important. Have it. Please have schedules. But when are you going to schedule people that you can invest in and build time? That's the thing that I always wrestle. It's not an easy answer. There's no pill for patience.
Boy. You mean coffee doesn't help me with my patience? I'm just saying. Well, so if we're trying to build people, and you talked about time, and then you talked about the patience that would come with giving away time. I always think of, I like to call them the 12 knuckleheads, right? Jesus spent time with these people. Obviously he had to be patient with them. Sometimes I kind of think he just smacks his head and goes, what? Is there another quality? Like I honestly poured into a lot of people, right? I've spent some time with people, and I think every major leader has poured time into somebody.
Yes.
And then something happened and they went left when you wanted them to go right.
Yes.
We've all been through that pain of watching somebody leave. So I might add a third quality to time and patience when we're building leaders, and it would be the willingness of the participant. Have you run into that at all?
Of course, willingness is the key. Willingness is the key, because if the other person is not willing to come alongside and to learn or to grow together, there is no point of you investing and giving all this time. Yes, some people will walk away from you. That's okay. They're blessing the kingdom somewhere else. That's not the big agenda for us. But a person has to be willing to say, yes, I like to learn. All of us have to learn. We may be born with some qualities, some characters of leadership. But I ultimately believe, and I know that scriptures will show us, that you have to be trained. Unless you walk that journey. Moses was a great leader. He proved it before his time that he wanted to kill people. He wanted to lead the people. He had in his heart the traits of leadership. But then the Lord takes him out from the scene, teaches him, brings him back again. I think that patience of developing as a leader, willingness. He was hesitant, but he was in the end willing, because his heart was there with the people. And ultimately he is willing to go and do that, to bring the people out of Egypt. And I think that's a willingness is a very important part of growing as a leader. If somebody doesn't want to grow, they're not going to be willing. You cannot force them.
And I know that, deep in my heart, I know that. And then I hear, those words of Jesus, go and make the world a disciple, right? Train them up as disciples. And I think, okay, I want to train somebody up to be a disciple, and how can they not have that willingness, right? And I guess it's the reality, right? In the world in which we live, some people make this commitment to Christ. And those are the people we invest in, and we look for their ability to become willing. We're patient with them. We hope that it'll come. But if we don't see the Holy Spirit moving in them in the same way, and they're not agreeing to the Holy Spirit's movement within them, there is a moment, right, where we have to make a decision. Are they willing or aren't they willing? Or maybe it's just not yet. I think that's what you're saying with patience, right? Maybe it's just not yet, right? Maybe we stay in contact with them, and we continue to pour into them, but maybe not at the same rate or in the same way we would pour into somebody who says, no, I want to follow Jesus with all I have. Am I correct in kind of talking about it that way? I mean, I wrestle with this, honestly. This is a big deal for me because, as an A personality person, and I know you are too, even though you come off as the perfect Zen pastor, but there is this reality, right, that I'm waiting for people to jump in, and sometimes that's not, they're not ready. They don't have the full willingness yet. Any advice on how to help them with their willingness, or is it really just time and patience?
Oh, there's a lot. It's willingness is tied up with patience and time, but also we know their attitude is very important. They want to come in to play this game. Their attitude is very important. And that's why Jesus told us to go make, he said. Don't go and pronounce. There's nowhere Jesus says go make Christians. It's just proclamation. We have made Christianity like a make a commitment and you're done. You've entered heaven and now you're done.
Yeah.
I think we're presented in a much more simplistic theology of discipleship by just saying make a commitment. And I think that's over. For many people, once they make a commitment, I'm Christian, I'm in, I don't need anything else. Jesus never said be a Christian, he said be a disciple. And discipleship is a lifelong learning process. It says that there is no certification for discipleship.
You mean I don't get a card? There's not a plaque?
Sorry, Bob, you can get plaques after plaques after plaques. You'll be still learning on discipleship. Yeah. That's the beauty of the Bible. Right. That's the beauty of God, that we are lifelong on a journey of discipleships. And it's a process for us. Never do we come to a place and say that I'm at a stage. Only Jesus can take that place where he says, I'm making you go make disciples. And it's a process. It's a lifelong process. So discipleship is not an overnight thing. It's not a certification. It's not a 9-month course. Or you finish a book, you become a disciple. You begin a journey. And I think this journey is a lifelong. Being in this world is not easy. It's very tough. And being a Christian is another step. The disciple is a bigger step, which is a deeper commitment. But what a joy to be a disciple. We don't hear that word, but the rest of the world, some places, some of the religions practice discipleship. And when they practice discipleship, boy, they like to follow that so well.
Somebody wants you. They want to be discipled by you. But so, and I agree with you, people want to be discipled. They want to walk through this, and other religions have that ability to kind of walk people or indoctrinate them, as some would say, into whatever that other belief might be. As a Christian, is there a characteristic or a part of, or an attitude that you find is more helpful in building a person, or seeing a person go from maybe the person who makes a commitment and doesn't move to the person who is really moving forward, has the willingness? Is there an attitude in there that really makes sense?
It is, because we are born, and when we are born, our minds are being formed and shaped into something. And everyone has a little bit of their own little egos, or whatever you want to call it. They just keep banking on that. They keep moving on that. But when you want to become a disciple, I think Jesus shows us in the book of Philippians, he talks about he made himself, he made himself, he humbled himself, or all those words you can say that, basically what he's saying is, Jesus just wanted to become a humble human being to identify with people. Though he was a king, though he was a Lord, yet he makes himself. And I think the attitude of saying humbleness, we have very less in our culture, in our society. because we all are born, either you're born to this family, that family, you may be high, you may be low self-esteem, whatever it may be, but there's some kind of a feeling in us that kind of wants us to be this. And the entitlement attitude that people have, entitlement, this is an attitude that people have, this is my right, this is that and this. I think there is no humbleness in our nature. And we need to learn more on that subject. Humbleness. How did Jesus humble? I mean, imagine him being the Lord of Lords. He made himself, or he makes himself humble so that he can impact the lives of the whole purpose he came is to impact the lives of the people. So humbleness is one of the great characteristics as a discipleship, because I'm willing to learn.
I think it's also part of the leader's responsibility too, right? There is that idea if we're going to build leaders, we're going to raise people up, we've got to give them time, we've got to give them patience, we got to look for their willingness. We have to have a willingness towards them. And then there's a humility from their part, right? And from our part, right? Because the reality is, I like to say to people, and sometimes this makes those Christians who think they've got it figured out, that I believe and follow a God I don't fully understand because he's bigger than me. And for some people that's kind of shocking. Wait, Pastor, you're supposed to have all the answers. And I say, no. If I have all the answers, then I'm God, and then we have a problem. Then we have a real problem, right? Because then you're not following Jesus. And I think in the same way, somebody who is looking to learn and become a disciple of Christ has to have the humility that you're talking about, that ability to humble oneself. Not humiliation, not, hey, you're an intern, so go pick up the garbage around the church or anything like that, but the humility to say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. And I can learn from someone else who's been a little bit farther down the road than me, right? So we've got those 4 things that we've now talked about, right? Time and patience and willingness and an attitude of humility. Is there anything else?
The key thing as you begin to learn humbleness, Jesus taught us that in this humbleness, he was also a servant leader. And the book of Mark portrays him as a servant who just came to serve us.
Okay.
And I think the key thing of the discipleship, he was trying to show them his servant. One of the passages in the Bible, John chapter 13, when I read it personally, I just have tears filled. I can never understand the Lord of Lords bowing himself down, tying a towel, and saying, give me your feet. My brother, this world has no idea what it means. When you go travel around the world, the first thing that people do when you come to their houses, they wash your feet because you walked in the dust. And it's always the servant who washes the feet of the guest as they come. Here's Jesus who gets off his chair. It's not the servant, but he says, I need to wash your feet. And Peter has the idea. He knows, Lord, you can touch me. You can wash me. Peter has the right way of looking at it. Right. But Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part in me. And then he gets it. He's trying to teach me a lesson that I need to be a servant. And he does that. But one of the key characteristics of finding a disciple, working with a disciple, is he humble? Is he willing to be a servant? Most people would love to be a boss. We are a culture of titles.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! Isn't it? Yeah, we could do a whole program on the titles of America, like the new ones. I'm the new social cultural chairman. What?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. People love titles as if titles makes them something. But Jesus is teaching in this process for us to be a servant leader is to serve. Now. Lately, the Fortune 500 companies are looking at this and saying, you know what, as a CEO, I'm supposed to serve. Now, slowly they're coming, the pendulum is swinging back to the biblical values. We already had this, but we didn't practice. I'm a senior leader, or I'm the chief pastor, or I'm this or that, whatever it is. My friends, are you at the end of the day, are you serving people? Do you have that attitude? It's not about washing somebody's feet, but do you have the attitude of doing that? One of my leadership seminars that I do on servant leader, I love to sometimes just shock people. In some parts of the world, when you're a teacher, they put you up on the pedestal. They won't even let you take a cup of coffee from where you're sitting. You've been there. You know what I'm talking about. Because you came from that place, or you are a teacher. You're not supposed to do this. Sometimes when I'm teaching a session on servant leadership, I slowly ask my team to bring a basin of water and a towel. And I bring it and I preach on John chapter 13 and I tell them, this is the time that a leader has to show that he's a servant. I'm here, the towel is here, the water is here. I want you to come. I want to wash your feet. What? And one of the sessions I did at Bob, as people were sitting around, no one moved.
Wow.
It was a holy silence. Wow. And I said, I'm here, the water is here, the towel is here, the Lord is asking me to wash somebody's feet. Would somebody get up and come? I want to wash their feet. I saw people sitting with tears. And then slowly, one person would get up and they would come and they would sit, and I just, warm water, just wash their feet, just clean them with a towel. And they would say that they would just walk away from there. Do you think after you do that, you have to really teach on servant leadership? Part 2. You don't have to.
Right.
You are a teacher.
Right.
So I think there's a great lesson. And I'm not asking that you start a ritual of washing this so that people understand you. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the attitude. I'm saying the attitude that comes from inside to be a servant leader. When you come to that level, you are ready to grow as a disciple of the Lord, as a leader for the Lord.
I'll never forget, I was in another church, and I was just one of the servants. I hadn't yet climbed any ladder. God hadn't ordained me to go and do anything else yet. But I was sitting in this meeting, and I remember sitting there, and there was food served, and the gentleman next to me was somebody who worked for me. And he got up from the table, and he went and cleared everybody else's place. And I was like, holy cow. And then I realized it was him and the senior pastor who were cleaning off everybody else's plate, everybody who was in the room. And I will never forget the effect it had on me, like, oh, that's what's meant, right? They're living it out. They're maybe not washing my feet, but they're picking up my plate. They're asking me if I need anything. They're continuing to say, is there anything I can do for you? Can I serve you? I think you're right. Those are really powerful words, and then they're followed by the actions. When people see those actions, then they want to emulate them, because then all I wanted to do was get up and start doing what they were doing, because I was like, that is what we're called to do, right? And so, wow. So there's another characteristic, right? Being of servanthood. So we've got 5 or 6 right now. So is there well, that's 5. Is there a 6th thing that we should be, as leaders, raising up others, that we should be looking for?
Yeah, so
or doing that, I guess.
Yeah, the segue for us is to see that as you come off of a servant leader attitude, once you reach that place, and then as you begin to look at the people again, you see them not who they are, but what they can become. Jesus, when he walked on the shores, watching these fishermen, rough, tough guys who are business people, their language is different, not a language, but you know what I'm saying, the
right.
Galileans, and he comes in and he says, I can make you fishers of men. I'm going to make you leaders. I'm going to show you how you can become. He saw from catching the fish, now you can catch people or lead people in other ways. So I think that is so important for a leader, Bob, to look into people, not make a judgment. You're just this person, or you just do that, but looking at a person and saying, you could become that, and I will make you, he says. What a powerful word that is. If leaders can grasp that, our attitude of looking at people will change. We need to see people differently. People are broken, people are hurt. So many people that we come across in our work, we see them, but we don't see them like who they were. We see them who they can become.
Right.
And that's what God says. When Samuel was looking for a king of Israel, he was looking at the stature and all that. And God says to him, no, I'm not looking at that. My leader, or the king of Israel, is right now is a shepherd watching the sheep out there. Samuel was looking at the stature. He looks good. He's big. He looks like a king. But God was looking at the shepherd boy who was going to be the next king. I think as a leader, God must give us the eyes to look at people beyond who they are, what they can become. That's the beauty of God's grace and love in our lives, isn't it?
Yeah, seeing who they could become, right? And I think there's another component to that, right? I think it is sharing with them that vision. I think so many people have been told they're not a leader, or you could never do that, or maybe they've told it to themselves. I don't know. In our culture, right? self-worth. Well, I'm never going to be so-and-so, I'm never going to have $1 billion. They look at the scorecard of the world instead of looking at the different way in which God looks at the world, the way he turned it upside down through Jesus. And he says, no. You could make some real impact for me, right? And I think that's why we love those stories of the person in the congregation or the person at work who does some things that are just so profound because somebody along the way told them they could. They almost gave them permission, right? And I think if we're building people, we have to give them we have to give them a vision of who they are, and then we have to give them permission to go be that person, and by encouraging them on a continual basis. So I'm completely with you. I mean, I think of all the ways, right, that Jesus was being very clear with the disciples. You know, I got to go so that you can get the better gift because you're going to be something.
Yes.
And when they got the opportunity and the Holy Spirit touched them, holy cow, did the world change, right? Through those 12 normal, average, everyday guys, there wasn't theologian among them. There wasn't a high-paid scholar or anything else. They're just 12 ordinary guys who were committed and who had the characteristics that you talked about. They spent the time. They gave up their life of fishing, right? They were patient. 3 years walking behind somebody wondering, am I going to get a chance to be the leadership? That's why I think we both love that story where the two boys are fighting who's going to be the best among us, right? And Jesus is probably laughing like, just be patient. You're going to get your turn, right? And then that willingness, they all showed that willingness. And then the attitude of humility. At first they didn't have it, right? That's that whole pride thing coming in. That's the reverse. And we see that, right? We see that as leaders. That people come in thinking, I've done something in the business world or in another position somewhere else, so you should give me all of the authority that I had elsewhere. And we kind of look at it and going, yeah, no, the world we don't work by those standards. There's a different level here that we look at. And then, of course, the servant leadership. Then you talked about the vision for the future, right? That we have to tell them about their potential, seeing God in them and seeing them through God's eyes. Wow, that's just powerful. And then that encouragement, right? That permission giving as leaders. I think that's something we need to do more of. I think there are so many people who don't give permission. Because maybe as a leader, sometimes those leaders feel if I give you permission, then where am I left? Right? And I think that's really important for us. If we're going to build other people up, we've got to go with that line, right? We've got to go with that line. We're going to build them up so that they can be more and we'll be less. And then that God's honored, right? Especially now in the culture we're in, right? We're in a transition in America, for sure, and maybe worldwide in Christendom. And so if you and I aren't trying to find and build up leaders so that we can become less, who's going to do it? Right? So I really appreciate these 8 characteristics of building leaders, and I look forward to our next talk on all of this. So thanks again, Peter, and we'll catch up with everybody probably next week around this time.
Yes.
All right? Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Bob.